Hey everybody, this is chapter 2. This is the first video of 3 videos that I'll be doing on this chapter. Most students are really not big fans of this material, so just so you know that, if you do feel that way, you're not alone. This chapter is really, for our purposes, just going to cover the very basics of chemistry. This is not a chemistry class, so we don't need to go into the, too much detail. And so just pay attention as I go through these videos, because I'll let you know, like, hey, this slide is important. This concept is important. You will be tested on it. Or I might say, don't worry so much about this slide. All right. So definitely want to pay attention to that stuff. That way you focus on what you should focus on and not waste time on other items. All right, so let's go ahead and get this started. So chapter 2, all about chemistry. Keep in mind, if you are reading the book, that the book goes into much greater detail than my PowerPoint. So just stick to the PowerPoint. That's my suggestion. All right, so biochemistry. Biochemistry is a branch of chemistry, as you all probably already know. And biochemistry is really the kind of chemistry that we deal a lot with in physiology. So biochem is very important to understand. And, you'll be dealing a lot with biochemistry in this class as well as Bio 139. All right, so biochemistry, what is it? Well, it's the study of the molecules that make up living organisms. Okay, so obviously that will be important for physiology. You have 4 main items here, okay, that we're going to study when we're dealing with biochemistry. So we will look at the structure and function for each of these classes of molecules. So we'll look at carbohydrates, fats, proteins, nucleic acids. Those are the main categories that we're going to look at. Now, definitely what you should know, now this is not written on your slide, so this is an example of something not written on the slide that I'm only going to mention in a lecture video, which is why it's important for you to watch the lecture videos, because I'm pretty sure, well, 100% sure, that you'll have a question relating to the order in which living organisms are going to break these down for energy. All right, so carbohydrates, fats, proteins, and nucleic acids are our major classes of macromolecules that you find making up living organisms. And you've all heard you are what you eat. Okay, I like to say you are what you eat, so you have to eat what you are. All right, this is what we are made of. If you break the human body down, this is what you're going to find. And guess what? We eat these things, right? Yes, we have to continually replenish what we are made of because we use those things up. So question, like on a quiz or exam that you might have about this is, again, the order in which we're going to break these down for energy. So the first thing that your body's going to break down for energy is carbohydrates. This is the '1 major source of energy that you get from what you eat and drink, carbohydrates. So, there's all those fad diets out there dealing with taking carbohydrates out of the diet. Really not great. I mean, that's more designed for someone who leads like a very sedentary lifestyle, which actually a lot of us are doing right now with COVID. But carbohydrates, you're going to use these up pretty quickly. So if you're a fairly active person, I mean, I don't mean someone who goes to the gym all the time, that kind of stuff, or runs a mile every day, but just at your average level of activity, walking to and from your car to the grocery store, walking around campus, going around shopping, walking around, just your average level of activity. A person really doesn't need to cut out their carbohydrates because these carbohydrates get used up first. They're the first to be used for energy. Now, what if you have used all your carbohydrates for energy, but your cells still need energy to function? Well, the next thing that's going to happen is protein will then start to be broken down for energy. Okay, so it's going to be carbohydrates first. When we run out of those, then we start breaking down protein. If we run out of protein to break down, we're then going to go to fat. Okay, so fat is going to be the last thing that's broken down for energy. Fat is more intended to be a long-term energy storage, such as if you're in a starvation state or something, you would be more likely to survive longer the more fat you have on your body, right? So that is going to be the last thing you break down for energy, and that explains why it's so hard for all of us to lose weight. And that's why these carb diets were created, were to fool your system. Not a great idea, all right? You need all these things. You have to eat all these things. They're required because you're made of all these things. So if you stop consuming carbohydrates, what your body then does is first it starts breaking down protein, which is why these low carb or no carb diets, part of that includes a high consumption of protein, right? Well, if you're not getting enough protein, so let's say you have no carbohydrates, and you're breaking down protein. Well, what if you run out of protein? What if maybe you didn't eat enough protein? All right, you're going to need a lot of protein to make up for the lack of carbohydrates that would normally be used as the first source of energy. So proteins then get broken down, but where is protein in the body? We store a lot of protein in our muscle. So that's why when someone's on one of these carb diets like this, they're going to lose muscle mass, okay? So the first weight that they're going to lose is not in fat, all right? It's in protein. They're losing muscle mass, and they'll start to look really gaunt. They're going to feel really weak because they don't have this primary source of energy from carbohydrates. And then, it's going to be a while, all right? Then eventually we're going to break fats down. So anyway, know your order here: carbs, proteins, fats. As far as minerals and vitamins, we'll bring up a few of those as they arise and talk about their importance. Two subfields of biochemistry: organic and inorganic chemistry. Maybe some of you have taken these classes. Really hard chemistry classes, in my opinion. Organic. So organic, the word organic means carbon containing. All right, so anytime you're studying organic chemistry, you're looking at molecules that contain carbon, all right? And so living organisms are considered organic, all right, because many of these carbs, proteins, and fats contain carbon. And then there's inorganic biochemistry, which is the opposite. And this is going to be the study of compounds that do not contain carbon. We won't deal so much with inorganic, maybe a little bit. All right, basic definitions here, not a big deal. All right, for quiz or exam, just basic definition for this. All right, what is an element? An element, as it says here, is the simplest form of matter. It cannot be broken down into simpler substances by ordinary chemical methods. Now, elements you can break down, though, into atoms. All right, so all elements are made up of atoms, and atoms really are the smallest particles of the element that still have the properties of that element. All right, there are 24 elements that have a biological role, and what you should know is what's in bold print here. I'm sure you'll have a question about this. Definitely want to know what these elements are that make up the majority of body weight. Okay, 98.5% of your body weight is going to be composed of these 6 elements. So you definitely want to know these 6 elements. And you're going to know them throughout this course and in Bio 139 because we're talking about these elements all the time. Okay, so, but for a quiz covering this chapter, definitely want to be sure to know what these 6 elements are: oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, calcium, and phosphorus. Now, when we talk about phosphorus in the human body, it will take on the form of phosphate. And we're definitely going to talk a lot about the importance of phosphate, as well as these others, all right? Calcium and the others as well, all right? We'll talk about these. So definitely know the 6 elements that make up most of your body weight. Now, minerals are inorganic, all right? Meaning they don't contain carbon. So they're inorganic elements that typically are going to come from the soil. Okay, and so we get inorganic elements in our diet as we go up the food chain, right? So whatever inorganic elements are in the soil, that goes into the plants, and then we eat plants, or the cow is going to eat those plants, and then we're going to eat that cow, right? Okay, so this is how we're going to get these, right, is sort of up through the food chain. Now, these are really important. These minerals that are listed here, and I actually have them itemized out here so you can see. And definitely this is very important. I'm so sure you'll have a question about this slide. All right, we definitely need to know these. Now, they're sometimes called minerals, sometimes called ions. Okay, we can call them by either name. All right. So definitely need to know these, and their abbreviations, because that's probably how you're going to see them written. All right. The first one is phosphorus or phosphate. Okay, this is part of a molecule known as ATP. Phosphorus has a lot of roles in the body, but I would say physiologically the most important role for phosphate or phosphorus is the fact that it makes up this very important ATP molecule. ATP is the molecule that you find inside cells that are really going to be what provides our cells the ability to do work, all right, to function. The energy to perform cellular function is retrieved from this ATP molecule. Okay, so I'll be talking about ATP a lot. Magnesium, all we really need to know, it does serve an important role as a cofactor in a wide variety of chemical reactions. So basically, for a certain chemical reaction to proceed, you need to have magnesium present. Okay, so magnesium is important for metabolism. Calcium is required. This is an important one. We're going to talk a lot about calcium. Calcium is absolutely required to perform muscle contraction. Okay, you cannot even perform a single muscle contraction unless calcium is present. Also, equally important, calcium is required for nerve impulse conduction. Okay, so for our brain cells to function, okay, many of them need calcium to be present, and we'll bring that specific issue up later when we talk about the nervous system. Another process that requires the presence of calcium is blood clotting. Potassium. So potassium, like calcium, is also required for muscle contraction and nerve conduction. And the same with sodium. Sodium is also required for these two. So calcium, potassium, sodium, all three of these are absolutely necessary in order for us to perform muscle contraction or nerve impulse conduction. Okay, so again, like calcium, so potassium and sodium, we're going to be talking about these ions a great deal all throughout this class. Okay, so definitely want to know their function. Now, another role that sodium plays is in water balance, which you'll learn a lot more about what's going on with sodium and water balance in Bio 139. You will spend a good deal of time studying that. But for now, do take note that, yes, sodium and water work together. All right, sodium basically is like paired with water. All right, so this is why sodium is going to play a role in water balance. Another one important one in physiology definitely is going to be iron. All right, so iron is a part of hemoglobin. Now, hemoglobin, I'm sure you've all heard of, is a protein, and the protein actually is pigmented. It demonstrates a red color. So hemoglobin is going to bind to oxygen, and in this way, the hemoglobin inside of our red blood cells is going to be what transports oxygen throughout the bloodstream. Okay, so you should know that iron, you have to have iron inside of hemoglobin, because iron will actually bind to oxygen, and then oxygen will be attached to the hemoglobin, and in this way, that hemoglobin will transport oxygen through the bloodstream. And again, that's something in Bio 139 that you're going to deal a lot with. Okay, but for this class, please do know these important minerals or ions and what they do. All right, for sure, a question on that. All right, basic definitions here. What is an ion? An ion is a charged particle. Charged, okay, so that means it's going to have a negative or a positive charge. All right, if you go back Let's see. Okay, so yeah, look at we've got magnesium, right? Magnesium, notice how it has a 2+. That means it's charged. It has 2 positive charges. Calcium, same thing, 2 positive charges. Potassium has 1 positive charge. Sodium has 1 positive charge. So because these are charged, they are classified as ions. Now, ions are of 2 kinds. You can have an anion or a cation. Anion is going to be something with a negative charge. So something like chloride, for example. Chloride has 1 negative charge. It's classified as an anion. Cation is one with a positive charge, and those are the ones that I just mentioned. Now, ions with opposite charges are going to attract to each other. Okay, so an anion will attract to a cation, and they will form a bond together. Electrolytes. What are electrolytes? This is a word that's thrown around a lot and abused. I'm not sure if people know what electrolytes are. You should know the basic definition of what an electrolyte is. Okay, it's something that's capable of ionizing in water, okay, which means it's capable of joining together with charged particles, with other charged particles, okay? And importantly, an electrolyte is going to be a substance that's capable of conducting electricity in water, all right? So in water, an electrolyte can conduct electricities. The most important ones for us are sodium and potassium. Okay? These 2 ions are very much associated with electrical excitability in certain tissues, such as nerve tissue and muscle. Remember, I mentioned muscle contraction and nerve impulse conduction depend on sodium and potassium. And you should know these are electrolytes. Okay? Electrolyte balance is critical. It's very critical. And we're going to talk about that in lab 3, I think it is, or lab 4. We will mention how, sort of demonstrate why this electrolyte balance is so important. All right, you need to have balanced, proper levels of sodium and potassium, for example, in order to do these things like muscle contraction and all that stuff. All right, if you're out of balance with this, all right, if you don't have enough potassium or enough sodium, for example, your brain may stop working if it's severe enough. All right, if the deficiency is severe enough, you can go into a coma. All right, that's how important it is to have proper levels of these. All right. You may recognize this from certain drinks, like, let's see, I'm trying to think of a specific one, like energy drinks, all right? So the energy drinks, a lot of them, if you look at the label, it'll say something like, enhanced with electrolytes or something like that. So like Gatorade, right? Gatorade is a good example. A lot of people say if you've had a heavy night of drinking alcohol and the next day you're feeling hungover, that you need to drink something like Gatorade. Or even Pedialyte, which is given to kids, right? Because, well, all that alcohol makes your ions work hard, okay, afterwards, when you're like recovering from that. So you end up losing a lot of your electrolytes. So, yeah, I mean, like Gatorade and Pedialyte, stuff like that, can help restore your electrolyte balance. So it's pretty good, to have those things if you're feeling sluggish or weak, or maybe your nutrition has not been that good, or you're hungover, or you're not feeling well. Those kind of things are pretty good to take to help restore your electrolyte balance, because we need these things. Free radicals, probably not going to ask you about it. This is really just here for curiosity. I may talk more about it in chapter 3. So what is a free radical? It's a substance that's not going to live very long. It doesn't last long, but it has an unusual number of electrons. Now, let me just try to explain. We're forming free radicals inside the body without realizing it. Okay, so let's say an example of how you would create free radicals. Let's say, for example, you have come down with a pretty serious viral infection or bacterial infection. And you're sick for like a week, right? You're not feeling well. Well, your immune system is working overtime during this to try and heal, the body, and to try to take out the pathogen, right? So your immune system works overtime, and so your immune system is synthesizing certain chemicals, all right, that are designed to be dangerous to the pathogen. So now think about it. If those things are dangerous, if the immune system is creating dangerous chemicals, toxic chemicals that are designed to destroy foreign pathogens, well, imagine that that chemical can also have negative effects on our own tissues. All right, so part of the byproduct of the immune system's activity is that it will produce free radicals. Now, we have certain organelles inside of our cells that are really good at destroying free radicals, but maybe we don't get all of them, okay? So you know, free radicals that hang around, if they're not destroyed by the body, they can be harmful to our own tissues, all right? They can cause damaging effects to all different types of tissues. So, you know, the existence of free radicals has been linked with cancer, to heart damage, and to the aging process, all right? So, you know, it's kind of messed up, you know, because it's like you want your immune system to work, you know, against this pathogen, but there's a side effect, all right? There is a side effect. We create these free radicals. Now, there are other ways to form free radicals, of course. Radiation will do this, and then there are certain other toxins and poisons that can lead to the formation of these free radicals. Now, this is related. Antioxidants. How are antioxidants related to free radicals? Guess what? Antioxidants destroy free radicals. Okay, so antioxidants are a group of chemicals that neutralize the activity of free radicals. So antioxidants are very, very good to have. Now, of course, we do have natural antioxidants that exist in our cells. And one example of one is called superoxide dismutase. It is an antioxidant enzyme, okay, that you find in the body, SOD. There's a couple of other examples I'll talk about. But, you know, it's like antioxidants. Can you name any of them? You know, we see this word all the time. Let's think antioxidants. Well, my favorite example is red wine, right? Why are they always saying red wine is good for you in moderate amounts? Because it is loaded with antioxidants. This is why moderate consumption of red wine is associated with living longer, with you know, the prevention of heart disease, okay? And of course, there's so many examples. There are so many different types of vegetables and fruits that are going to have these antioxidants in them. So you should look for these, and you know, it's a pretty good thing to try to incorporate into your diet to you know, help you with these issues. Chemical bonds. Chemical bonds simply is when you know, it's going to involve an attraction between one molecule and another. Okay, so we're going to talk just a little bit about chemical bonds. I don't want to go into too much detail with it. Some of the most important types of chemical bonds, if you've taken chemistry, which all of you have had some exposure to chemistry, this should sound familiar. You have bonds, covalent bonds, hydrogen bonds, van der Waals forces. The only ones really that you'll probably ask about would be ionic bonds or covalent bonds. All right, these are particularly important, and hydrogen bonds are too in the human body. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about it. What about bonds? What is an ionic bond? That means we have an attraction between an anion and a cation. All right. And I believe the next picture, let me just skip ahead real quick. Right. So this is like an ionic bond. What we have is an anion here, sodium, and we have a cation. Please take note of that. I just made an error. Sodium is a cation. Cation is a positively charged ion. So what we have is we have a cation, and it's an anion, right? Positive and negative go together. And when ions bond together, we simply ionic bond. So that what you're looking at would be like table salt, sodium chloride. And I'm just going back a slide here. All right, and this is repetitive, okay? Just, you know, what's an anion, what's a cation? You should know examples of each. Okay, and that's it for that. All right, so covalent bonds then. Covalent bonds, there's a little more to these. You can categorize covalent bonds in different ways, okay? But first of all, you should know a definition of what is a covalent bond. It is when we have the sharing, all right, the sharing of two or more electrons between atoms, okay? So electrons basically are going to be like orbiting or circling an atom, okay? And so these electrons that are orbiting atoms are capable, in some cases, of being shared, okay? They're capable of being shared. So all we really need with this is that you know that if we have the sharing of two electrons between atoms, this is called a single bond, a single covalent bond. If we have 4 electrons that are being shared, this results in a double covalent bond. And then if we have 6, then this means we have a triple covalent bond. Okay, so now outside of whether we have single, double, triple bond, we can also classify the covalent bond in terms of whether it's polar or non-polar. And I'm sure you'll have a question about this. This is really, important to know what the difference is between polar and non-polar, because this is going to be coming up a lot. Okay, so first of all, definition-wise, with covalent bond, if it's a non-polar covalent bond, then that means the electrons are shared equally. A polar covalent bond means that the electrons are shared unequally. Okay, and that's it for that. But there's another really important point, and it's probably the point I care about the most, and what you should care about the most in physiology is what else does it mean when we say we have a non-polar covalent bond or a polar covalent bond. And so the difference here is this second point here, all right? Non-polar, whenever you see the word non-polar, you should associate that with meaning lipid-based, okay? Lipid is fat-based. So what this is telling you is that if we're dealing with a non-polar covalent bond, this is a chemical bond that is only going to exist in fat-based environments, okay? Anything that is fat-based or lipid-based, okay, we consider that to be non-polar, all right? What about polar then? Polar is the opposite. Polar means we have a bond, a covalent bond that is only capable of existing in water-based environments, okay? Aqueous or water-based environments, okay? So polar covalent bond you want to associate with being water-loving, okay? They're going to exist in water-based environments. Water itself is the most popular polar covalent bond. These are just pictures. I'm not going to go through these, okay, but it's just basically showing you like an example of a single bond. Okay, it's a single bond. You're not going to see pictures like this on the exam or anything. And this is just there for you to look at if you're interested in seeing like kind of like how these electrons are like orbiting and that they can be shared, between atoms. I do want to point out though on these pictures, because you may see it like this, that how a molecule is illustrated. All right, so in this case, hydrogen is hydrogen is going to be a single bond here, okay, between these two hydrogens. And so my point is, if it's a single bond, it'll be illustrated by this one line. If you have a double bond, right, like here is a carbon dioxide molecule, carbon and 2 oxygens, then we have double bonds, and you'll see those as 2 lines, okay? So be sure you're able to recognize that as a double bond. More pictures there if you're interested. Hydrogen bond, we're not really going to talk much about. It is sort of a weak sort of chemical attraction, and it's going to make up the bonds that you see in the water molecule, okay? So H2O makes up the water molecule. Okay, so hydrogen is going to attach to oxygen. by way of hydrogen bond. Okay, now also hydrogen will bond with nitrogen. Now this is not in water, okay, but this is in other substances that you find in the body, such as ammonia, and lots of other different examples. Okay, but we can have hydrogen bond with oxygen, as you see in water, or we can have hydrogen bond with nitrogen, as you see in things like ammonia. Okay, that's all we really need on that slide, nothing else. Okay, here's just sort of an illustration of the water molecule if you want to kind of see how it's oriented. All right, we do have our oxygen molecule bound to 2 hydrogens, and notice how this molecule is angled. Notice how it has an angle to it. And that structure of water is going to come up later when we do chapter 3. I want to talk about water and how we get water in and out of a cell. A lot of that is going to be based on this very unique angular structure of this water molecule. Okay, more on water. So what percentage of body weight is water? Well, depending on the source, you're going to get a lot of, you're going to get a lot of different numbers for this, all right? I would like you all to know that this is a range, okay? A lot of people will say, oh yeah, you're made up of 80% water, or you're made up of 70% water. That's not true of everybody at all times, all right? You're going to range anywhere between, at any given time, anywhere between like 50 to 75% body weight, something like that, all right? Again, it's going to vary by individual. Maybe one day someone's at 45%, maybe the next day they're at 85%, right? But 50 to 75% is a good range that I think you all should know, all right? Now, why is it going to vary? Well, for obvious reasons. Number one, it depends on how much water a person consumes, right? If you have a person who consumes 8 glasses of water a day, then yeah, they're probably at that high end of the range, right? If you have someone that only has like 1 or 2 glasses of water a day, then they're going to be at that lower range. Percentage of body weight that water consumes is also based on other factors like age, gender, fat content as well, and just a lot of other things too, okay? So this is going to vary. I already mentioned that the water molecule has this angle shape. It's like a V shape. And we'll mention again why that's important in sustaining life. Now, another real important process, dealing with water. Very, very important. I know you're going to have a couple of questions about this. And that's because we're going to deal with these chemical processes called hydrolysis and dehydration synthesis. These are really important chemical reactions that you need to know about in physiology. We're going to be talking about them a lot. Now, water plays a role in both of these chemical processes, and we're going to go into some detail about these 2 chemical processes. Some more terminology here relating to water. Definitely need to know these terms because these terms I'll be using. You'll be hearing them a lot. Okay, so water, well, it is considered the universal solvent, all right? It dissolves chemicals. It is the greatest solvent that humans have discovered, all right? There's no other greater solvent than water. If you just leave something in water, eventually it's going to be completely dissolved because water, that's what it's good at, dissolving. Now, hydrophilic and hydrophobic, what do these terms mean? Hydro means water. Philic means loving or to love. Hydrophobic, phobic means to fear or fear of. So hydrophilic literally translates to water loving. Hydrophobic means water fearing. Okay, so if a substance is hydrophilic, that means it likes to be in water. Any substance that's hydrophilic must exist in a water-based environment. Hydrophilic. Now, something else you can call this, if something is hydrophilic, that means that it's also polar, or it's going to contain polar chemicals, because polar chemicals like to be in hydrophilic environments, water-based environments. Okay, so hydrophobic then is the opposite. Okay, hydrophobic is a word that you can use to classify molecules that are nonpolar, okay, or substances that do not like to exist in water. Okay, so these are going to be fat-based substances considered to be hydrophobic. So you should definitely know what hydrophilic and what hydrophilic mean. Okay, another term related to this is amphipathic. Amphi means both. Okay, both. Like, think of amphibian, the frog, amphibian. Amphibian is called amphibian because it lives on both land and water, both. Okay, so amphipathic, if something is amphipathic, that means this is a substance that can exist in both, all right, hydrophilic and hydrophobic atmospheres. The best example for us in physiology of an amphipathic molecule, which we're going to go into detail with in chapter 3, is called a phospholipid. All right, we will talk a little bit about phospholipids in this chapter. All right, like the basic structure of a phospholipid. You should definitely know that this is a real popular example of a substance that's amphipathic. That means it can exist in both water-based and fat-based environments. Some more definitions here. Solution. So what's a solution? You're not going to be asked about it. Okay, I'm not even going to ask you what a definition of that is. What you should know is that in a solution, you're going to have something called a solvent and a solute. Okay, and we're going to talk about these a lot, solvent and solute. So you must know what the definitions of these are, because we're going to throw these words around quite a bit. So solvent is a liquid, okay? And in our case, we're almost always talking about water, okay? Water is like the solvent of the human body, okay? So water, it's usually the solvent that we're talking about, but it can be another liquid. A solute is a solid, okay? It's usually a solid. It can be a gas too, all right? Solid or gas. So the solute is the substance that's going to be dissolved by the solvent. Acids and bases. All right, just 1 second here. Take a drink of my water. Put some focus on these, because you'll have 2 or 3 questions relating to acids and bases. So let's talk about it. So acids and bases are electrolytes, which can ionize and dissociate in water. So first, let's talk about acids. You should know the definition of an acid. Okay, so an acid is an electrolyte, or you don't have to say electrolyte. It's a substance, okay, that is considered a proton donor, okay, proton donor. So now when we talk about protons here in this case, we're talking about hydrogens, okay? We're going to call, because hydrogens have a positive charge on them, we can call that little positive charge a proton. So what we just say is we can just call this a proton donor, okay? And we're dealing with hydrogen, okay? Hydrogen ions, they each have a positive charge. And so what acids do when they're in a solution, okay? When they're in water, an acid is going to donate its protons to the surrounding solution. Okay, so this is your definition. Acids are proton donors. Okay, they're going to donate their hydrogen ions to the surrounding solution. An example of this is HCl, hydrochloric acid. You've all heard of HCl. This is the one down in the stomach that does a lot of digestion for us. So HCl, okay, in solution, can be broken down into the hydrogen by itself plus a chloride, right? It's going to disassociate, all right? Because what happens is, because HCl is a acid, it's going to donate its proton, okay? So it will let go of its hydrogen and donate it to the surrounding solution, okay? You should know some important, some names of some of the important acids, because we'll talk about them. HCl, I just mentioned. Acetic acid, I don't have that in bold because I'm probably not going to ask you about it, but you may study that in Bio 139. Carbonic acid, you should go ahead and know that carbonic acid is a popular type of acid that you're going to find in the human body. And carbonic acid is really important in metabolism. It's important in the transport of substances in the bloodstream as well. And you will definitely study that in detail in Bio 139. For now, just know the basic, just the names, all right, of some of these important acids. What about bases? So bases, and instead of donating their protons, they're going to accept protons. Okay, so your definition for a base is that a base is a proton acceptor. It is going to pick up hydrogen ions from the surrounding solution. Okay, example is ammonia. Ammonia is NH3, and in solution, okay, it will pick up a hydrogen. Okay, so see here, we're going to combine ammonia with one of these extra hydrogens or protons that are sitting out there in the solution, and then that hydrogen bonds with ammonia to form ammonium. Okay, it's just a different version of it that is going to be transported, so then it becomes NH4. Okay, so bases definition is that it's going to be a proton acceptor. It's going to pick up hydrogen ions from the solution. Okay, the only other important thing on this slide is, you know, just like with acids, you should know the names. Just be familiar with the names of a couple of important bases that you find in the human body. Bicarbonate, okay, that's another one associated with carbonate or carbonic acid that you'll study in Bio 139. And then ammonia, like we just mentioned. Oh, this slide is blurry, but I want you to know you want to highlight this slide. This is a really important one. Kind of hard to see, but I think I can get through it. All right, so acids and bases can be measured by something known as pH. pH is a measure of the concentration of hydrogen ions in a solution. You should know that. All right, pH is a measure of the concentration of hydrogen ions in a solution. Now, whenever you see these little brackets around an ion or element, that means concentration or amount. Okay, so I don't know if you can see that there, but they're like brackets. All right, definitely need to know the numbers here. So pH of 7, all right, got to know these numbers, is considered to be a neutral pH. Okay, don't worry about what's in parentheses. I'm not going to worry you with that. Okay, just know the number here, 7. 7 is considered neutral. Anything less than 7, if you get a measurement of a pH of less than 7, that means the solution is acidic. Okay, so less than 7 and the solution is acidic. Greater than 7 is basic. Definitely want to know those numbers for sure. Okay, what is a buffer? A buffer is something that you can add to a solution to resist any changes in pH. It's something that's used a lot in labs when you're studying chemicals and stuff like that. You can use these buffers to neutralize pH. Now, very important number here that you must know for the rest of your life, and that is, what is normal blood pH? Guarantee, gotta know it for the rest of your life. Normal blood pH is 7.4. So that's slightly basic, all right? Just slightly basic. I just had a memory on this, just to add to that whole carbohydrate diet thing. You know, one of the problems with those carbohydrate diets is that, all right, you're not getting any carbs, you're breaking all your protein down. Now, when you do start breaking down fat, you're going to start breaking fat down so rapidly because that's the only source of energy that you have. You don't have carbs and you've broken down protein. So what happens is fat then will start getting broken down really rapidly. And so when that happens, you get these little structures called ketone bodies. When you break down fatty acids, you get something called ketone bodies. And ketone bodies are very acidic. And the ketone bodies cannot be broken down quick enough, so they spill over into the bloodstream, and then you end up having a low pH. The person will end up having acidic blood. And acidic blood can cause coma and death. Okay, so just so you know, this pH, you know, the level is so important to maintain this 7.4. Any minor deviation from 7.4 can cause serious problems in a person. That's good. Next page. Again, this still is a really important slide here relating to acids and bases. So I'd say definitely you want to know all of this slide. Okay, so remember, pH is a measure of how many hydrogen ions are in a solution. Okay, so an acidic solution means you have a higher concentration of hydrogen ions in that solution. Okay, but don't get confused because this will measure as a low pH. Okay, so remember, acidic means that the solution has a high concentration of hydrogens, but a low pH. All right, you should know your acidic pH range between 0 and 6.99. Neutral, all right, 7. Pure water is pH 7, just out of curiosity. Basic solution, which basic you can also call alkaline. All right, in this case, we're going to have a low concentration of hydrogen ions. Why are we going to have a low concentration of hydrogen ions in the solution? Because basic substances pick up hydrogen ions from the solution, so the solution will have a low concentration of hydrogen. Acidic, remember, what is an acid? What's the definition? The definition is it's a proton donor. So it's the solution surrounding the acid will have a high concentration of hydrogen ions because acids are donating their hydrogens to the solution. Okay? And remember down here, basic, we're going to have a higher pH. It's 7.01 to 14. Definitely got to know your ranges on there. Here's just a picture of several different products here that tell you the pH. So I'm not going to ask you to memorize that. All right. You know, it's just there for your curiosity. Only value that I do really need you to know are, you know, the ranges of the acids and bases, and of course, what normal physiological pH is, and that's 7.4. All right, so we're going to switch gears here for just a minute and talk about energy. All right, so we talked just a little bit about chemistry, and chemistry and energy are very related in physiology. If any of you ever take physics, you know, you will study energy. All right, and so we're going to deal with it just a little bit in physiology. So what is energy? The definition means, well, it refers to the capacity to do work, okay, to do something, to put matter into motion or action. All right. And, you know, we see this everywhere, all over the human body. When we're doing physiological processes, it's a form of energy. All right. We're using energy, and something you should keep in mind with all things is that energy cannot be destroyed. It is going to be converted from one form into another. Okay, very rarely will you see energy wasted. All right, energy will be used. If it can't be used in one system, that energy is converted to a different kind of energy so that it can be used to do something else. All right, we'll see when we study the nervous system and muscle contraction how we actually have this we have a conversion from chemical energy to electrical energy. All right, so that's just an example of that. All right, and then the book gives you a little example here of everyday life. Turning a lamp on converts electrical energy to light energy, right? So we see this all the time. We deal with it all the time. There are two main types of energy, potential and kinetic. I don't have okay, this should, on this slide, this is describing potential energy. I apologize, I don't know where my title went on this slide, but so this slide is all about potential energy. Potential energy is referring to stored energy. That's why it's called potential, because the energy has the potential to be to start some process. It has the potential to do something. Okay, so it's considered inactive because it's not doing anything at that time. Okay, but it has the potential to be active. So what's going to happen is potential energy is going to be converted into kinetic energy. All right, remember that potential energy is stored energy that can be released, okay, resulting in some sort of action. Example is chemical energy, and this is actually a really important example that you should always, always, always keep in mind. I really think it's going to help you when we're trying to understand ATP. We're going to talk about ATP and how we use ATP for cellular energy. And understanding that requires you to get this point here, all right? So always keep this in mind. Okay, chemical energy, right? Okay, let me just say it this way. When you have a chemical bond, okay, when you have a chemical bond, let's say it's an ionic bond or a covalent bond, doesn't matter. When you have a chemical bond, whenever that bond is broken, energy is released, all right? The reason for that is that chemical bonds store potential energy. Chemical bonds store energy. So what that means is if you break that chemical bond, that energy is released, okay? And now we have kinetic energy. So something to keep in mind all the time, especially when dealing with, when we talk about ATP, and I'll bring it up again, is that whenever you break a chemical bond, energy is released from that process, okay? It's like digestion, right? When you're eating, okay, and the body starts to break down that food, you're breaking chemical bonds, okay? And so that is how energy is released from food, okay? It's one of the ways how, in general, you know, we're going to get energy from what we eat because we're breaking down chemical bonds. Chemical bonds store energy, and now when we break those bonds, we can use that energy because it's released, right? Remember, energy does not die, okay? It's just converted from one form to another. Kinetic energy. So kinetic means this is referring to actual movement or action in real time. Something is actually happening. Electrical energy, which we'll study in nervous system and muscle contraction, we're going to be dealing with this kind of energy, electrical energy. Okay, so electrical energy results from the movement of ions like sodium and potassium, the movement of ions across a plasma membrane. The plasma membrane is the boundary around your cells. Okay, we'll talk in detail about plasma membrane in chapter 3. And yeah, so electrical energy, that's what you're observing when you see things like muscle contraction and nerve impulse conduction. We're seeing this because we're seeing the actual movement of ions. Remember, kinetic energy is the actual movement of something. So that's what we're seeing in those processes. Examples I'm not going to ask you about, but they're there if you want to know. Heat and electromagnetic energy are also considered forms of kinetic energy. So I think this is a good place to stop this particular video. And I'm going to be making another video and have that up for you very soon. Thank you, guys.